We have a saying in Asgard: where there are wolf's ears, wolf's teeth are near. It's a trap.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This is going to be my brand new Loki Episode 6 trailer video for the finale. There's a whole bunch of Easter eggs, a whole bunch of stuff they have to wrap up and set up for Loki Season 2, because there will be a Season 2, if you guys didn't know. They were talking about it last year, but they've been pretty quiet about it recently. I think just because they want to focus on the current episodes. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos. We're going to be getting Marvel What If episodes after the Loki finale, and I will be doing full episode videos for that. So I'll remind everyone at the end of the video, too. But careful for spoilers for all the Loki episodes up to this point if you have not been watching the series. And there's a surprising amount of footage from all these Loki trailers that we can now say is for sure from the finale. I always wonder when they release the promos and the trailers every week how much of the season finale they include in the earlier stuff. And it's always a surprise how much of the later episodes make it into the early stuff. They did the exact same thing with bigger shows like Game of Thrones on HBO for the later seasons. Like, you'd always get bits of the finales early without really knowing that you were watching part of the finale. So the main storyline, though, here heading into the finale is that Loki and Sylvie just defeated the Lost Smoke Monster, just kidding, defeating Alioth, who is kind of like the Loki series version of the Lost Smoke Monster. And because of all the Wizard of Oz references that other characters actually started making during the episode, I know I've been making a lot of Wizard of Oz revealing the man behind the curtain references, but they actually literally did it during this episode. And they kind of metaphorically pull back the Alioth curtain when they defeat him with the transition revealing the Citadel at the end of time. If Alioth weren't actually devouring people whole, like we actually see him really killing people during the episode, I would have said that he was a total fake out. But if it wasn't clear, though, he was real. He was capable of killing people. Like, he really did kill classic Loki in the sailors from the USS Eldridge. And just like the comic book version of his character, he does eat all these alternate timelines, or most of these alternate timelines, when they do arrive in the void. That's kind of the point. He acts as a trash compactor. It seems like he's also a creation or also serving whoever is at the end of time here. Ravonna Renslayer also on her way to this same place, the same Citadel at the end of time, using the information Miss Minutes had on the creation of the TVA and her other secret files to find a way past the void. Sylvie questioned her lies at the beginning of episode 5, just asking if that prototype ship she was hyping up was fake. Renslayer never really answered her, so it would be funny if they did pay that off as like another Kang Easter egg, having her fly a version of something that looks kind of like Kang's time ship from the comics. And just addressing a lot of these Kang the Conqueror Easter eggs because people are talking about him more and more. There were a lot of references to Kang during episode 5, but I still feel like the best the Loki people, like the producers, the writers, will give us from Kang in the finale is some kind of post-credit scene or some larger Easter eggs setting him up as a major threat. But I still feel like we're not going to actually see Jonathan Majors Kang in the flesh, or at least it seems like we won't see him in the flesh until Ant-Man 3 Quantumania. And they're just kind of using the Loki series to lay the groundwork, like lay the track work for why he's a big threat in the MCU. I think there was just a lot of evidence and scenes during episode 5 meant to tell us that what Loki and Sylvie are going to find, or who they're going to find inside that black castle, is going to be a big twist. It's not going to be who everyone wants it to be. So you need to be really careful about getting your hopes up about Kang stuff in the finale. Kang is kind of like the new Mephisto of the Loki series. It's probably not going to be Kang. But it was cool seeing a version of the Stark Tower, like the Avengers Tower from an alternate timeline that belonged to Kang. That's what the QENG on the tower meant. Also pronounced Kang is the name of a company in modern day run by one of the versions of Kang from earlier in his timeline. The Sphinx and the Great Pyramid are also kind of Kang Easter eggs. During Kang's first big Marvel story, he hijacked a version of Doctor Doom's time ship from the 20th century and disguised it as the Great Sphinx, using it to travel back to ancient Egypt to set himself up as Rama-Tut, ruling as a pharaoh for a while until he left, naming Apocalypse his successor. But the joke is that the Great Sphinx was his time ship, just made to look like the Great Sphinx. And yes, Alioth, the big smoke monster, had a big comic book connection to Immortus, who is the oldest version of Kang from later in his timeline, and Immortus also had a deep connection to the Timekeepers, and had his own futuristic city called the Chronopolis that looked just like the TVA. But like I said, I think those are just meant to be Easter eggs, and that's it. The footage from the finale, as you can see, is mostly just hyping up a version of King Loki. It'll be interesting to see what that scene winds up being. If it's a vision, or if it's something that's really happening, or it's from an alternate timeline. Then the halls of the Black Citadel itself, Loki walking through, it just seems like it's this cavernous place. This is also meant to be Sylvie you're seeing in the middle of a fight here spinning around with her short sword. Her costume just looks a little bit different, a little darker, because there's barely any illumination inside this great room inside the Citadel. Like there's a fireplace over here, there's bookshelves in the background, a pedestal with a book on it. It's just like a living room for the person who's behind all this. What would you do if you literally had all the time in the universe, or the multiverse, so to speak? Doesn't it kind of remind you of the inside of Loki's cell from Thor the Dark World, with all the books that his mother had given him? The whole thing with the light at the top of the tower, the camera just keeps focusing on it during Sylvie's vision from Alioth, and then from the ending scene, it just seems like they're implying that it's the source of this person's power, where they're broadcasting from, so to speak, controlling everything from the actual end of time. The way they explain the timeline here, too, like the way reality exists in this place, per Renslayer earlier in the episode, is that as we all suspected, there really is a multiverse. Like we all kind of thought that, even though the way they explained the sacred timeline was a little confusing. But that also confirms why there can be so many variants of Loki, of everyone running around who don't get pruned. But the actual end of time is meant to be like this vanishing point of the multiverse where all timelines from different universes converge and literally vanish into oblivion. Like it just ends. It's like the heat death of the multiverse. The closest reference I can make to the way that Marvel tries to explain this in a scientific way, like an actual real-world scientific way, is that what happens after the heat death of the current version of the multiverse is that another Big Bang cycle happens, and the next version of the multiverse is born and a new timeline begins, like year zero, and then everything happens again in relatively similar order, but slightly different because it's a brand new timeline. Like the first thing that happens is that a new version of eternity is born with a completely different personality from the previous one, different consciousness, different goals. Then eternity creates the Celestials, then the Celestials start experimenting with life all over the different universes, then so on, so forth, up to present day where versions of all the characters that we know come around, but they're all slightly different versions because it's a totally new timeline. But a lot of what's actually happening here in this place at the end of time on the Loki series just depends on the way they explain why the main villain did all this stuff with the TVA, the Timekeepers, and why the person seemingly prunes more Lokis than any other person in the multiverse. I'll explain why I think that is in a second too, because it has to do with who the main villain is. I still love the theory that Miss Minutes is also deeply connected to this because she's existed since the creation of the TVA, so she would also have to have been created by the person who's behind all this. So it sounds like she's more of like a sub-boss, so to speak, if you want to think about her being evil. And I'm trying to keep my mind open about a couple of the wilder theories about the final boss, but I still feel like the best one, at least just given all the information that they gave us during episode 5, is that the person here at the end of time is meant to be like the final boss form version of a Loki. We keep making all the Agatha Harkness jokes, it was Loki all along. But if you really think about what all the characters said during episode 5, and remember that the series is only 6 episodes long, and the reveal is going to have to be a character that we're already kind of familiar with, like the main villain will have to be a version of someone that we've been watching this whole time. Classic Loki, the other Loki variants, kept saying that the reason why there were so many Lokis in the void, more than any other type of person, is because all the other people, the regular people that got sent there, even other Thors, Frog Thor notwithstanding, died almost immediately, were killed by Alioth. And as Lokis, their big power move, like what is common amongst all versions of Loki, is that they are survivors. So who better to be the show's version of He Who Remains, the last living person in the multiverse, than yet another Loki? So if it's so easy for Lokis to just go camp out and do nothing by themselves for a long, long time, then it feels like they're trying to tell us that the final boss is a version of Loki who also just hatched a plan to run to the end of time where he could control all of time. And the reason he did that will probably wind up being some emotional callback to something that our Loki said earlier, like everything on the series is meant to connect to what's been going on with our Loki and his hero redemption arc. And that would also help explain why so many Lokis, more than any other person, wind up getting pruned and sent to the void. Because Lokis, more than any other person, are sort of like this big variable, big unknown, cause so many problems in so many alternate timelines that how do you get rid of those variables? Well, you get rid of them by sending them to the void. Whereas the way they imply, a lot of the other regular Marvel characters, the big A-list characters like the Avengers, are way more predictable. Like if someone is going to mess up your sacred timeline, your grand plan, it's probably going to wind up being a Loki. And who would know that better than yet another Loki? Lokis seemingly know themselves better than anyone else. Maybe we'll get another joke about that whole love is a dagger speech from episode 3. That was kind of funny. Loki's stabbing each other in the back. That was also kind of a theme of episode 5 too, with President Loki and his men. So who better to stab all Lokis across the multiverse, across all timelines in the back, than yet another Loki? but there's still a ton of other stuff that they have to wrap up in the finale, also set up Loki Season 2, and given how evil Renslayer came off in Episode 5, she seems so sinister now. I wouldn't be surprised if she also gets some sort of ending scene setting her up as a bigger threat in the multiverse in the MCU. Maybe if we're lucky, something that also foreshadows her eventual connection with Kang the Conqueror. I will talk about the future of Kang inside the MCU after the Loki finale, just depending on what kind of other Easter eggs and foreshadowing we get. So remember, just keep your expectations in check. We're gonna find out what's going on pretty soon anyway. My full Loki Episode 6 video will post next Wednesday just like normal, and then my Marvel What If episodes will start posting in August just like normal. There's also a really cool Loki deleted scenes video that I'll post tomorrow. They just revealed a bunch of really cool Frog Thor deleted scenes involving Chris Hemsworth. So make sure you have alerts enabled so you don't miss any of those videos. Congratulations, Miguel Martinez. You're the giveaway winner from my last big Marvel video. Please email me on the About page of my channel so I can get your contact details. Everyone click here for my full Loki Episode 5 video, and click here for my full Marvel What If trailer video and Easter eggs. Thank you so much for watching. Everyone stay safe.